Well, it is top of the hour, and we want to honor everyone's time. So we'll go ahead and get started. And we want to say thank you for being here with us today. We are all learners, and we are all trying to grow in our understanding of us as human beings and what that looks like for our role in our work in education. And I'd like to share a couple quick things here. First, we are the facilitators, Jen and Jeff. Jen, can you give a quick little bit about you?
Sure. So my name is Jen. I work at ESD 113 over in the Olympia Tumwater area, and to my two big buckets are advanced learning, which has a lot to do with highly capable and advanced learning programs, and then also new teacher support. So my other side is getting to work with new teachers and early career teachers. So super
wonderful, wonderful. I would say it's a pleasure. I've gotten to work with Jen on a few projects. We're across the state. She's on the west side. I'm on the east side. I'm over in Spokane, right near Idaho. And my role is at the ESD 101 as a secondary math coordinator. But that puts me in all sorts of fun things. I like this work because I love learning about learning and love learning about how to get better at learning myself and with others. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We have a full session for you, and hopefully more than your brain can handle, just the right amount. All right, speaking about our goals for today, we're thinking about 3 goals when you walk away. Hopefully you can describe yourself, the role of neurodiversity. What does neurodiversity have to do with learning? Learning for you, learning for the people you work with, learning with students, whoever that might be. Also, we hope that you'll be able to list a few ways to help fuel brain growth. How can you help fuel brain growth? What do we do with that? And then lastly, be able to list some practical ways and implications for your physical and digital spaces wherever you work and however you work. So first, though, let's look at this section. We're going to do 3 sections. And I don't know about you, but this picture, this was one of my middle school teacher pictures, put this one up, and they're like, oh, this is one of those optical illusion things. So I'm curious, take a look at the picture. Do you see a woman in that old drawing? Wait. Do you see the old woman looking towards you, or do you see the young lady turned away? Because that's usually what the two are that people see. And I showed this to one of my friends the other day. And he's like, I've never seen this before. But there are a lot of those fun optical illusions that we see things differently. Matter of fact, let's think about that and how we see things differently and how important that is for us. And speaking of seeing things differently, I invite you all right now, get your brains ready. I'm going to put up an image, a real simple image of some dots. And I encourage you to think about it as you think about it, however that is. And I'm not going to put it up for long, but what do you see and how do you see it? So get your brains ready. Jen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, she's got her paper ready too. She's going to capture her thinking there. You just watch the image. How do you see these dots? Give your brain a moment to think about it. And if I took the image away, how would you recreate it? Where are all of these dots? Does your brain see it more than one way? All right. Now, Jen, I know you were drawing because we were practicing this, but that's the dots. Could you share with us, maybe hold up your image? What did you see? Look at that. That's a great way to capture your thinking. It looks like you saw a 3 diagonal, 4 dots in diagonal, and then a 3, like a 3, 4, 3. That's way cool. So what I would like to do is invite the rest of us to go ahead and do something similar. And this time, would you think about how you see it, and go ahead and annotate that. Now, I noticed, Jen, you did it on a piece of paper, so go ahead and put it on a piece of paper if you want to. Or if you want to, grab your phone. Some of us have like an annotation feature on your phone. So you grab your phone and just take a picture and annotate right over the top. I'm going to do that on mine. Just like take a picture of it, however you want to. I'm going to give you a minute to just think about how you see this and annotate it up on your own. How do you see this?
I can't wait to see this. This is like my favorite part. Oh no, Colleen can't get in.
Colleen, I think you're in if I see you chatting in our session. When you're ready, and if you would like to do so, up on the screen now is a QR code or a bit.ly. We'll put the bit.ly in the chat as well, that you can go ahead and share out on a Padlet. What is it that you saw, and how is it that you see this? Oh, thank you so much. Oh, I missed the B.
I missed the B. I'm going to do it again. That B is important. It matters. There we go.
Jen, I'm going to wait one more moment. I'll let people go ahead and annotate their own and upload it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to upload mine too. I'm going to take a screenshot with my phone and then do the same thing. Jeff, could you do me a favor? Could you put the QR code back up? Because I'm going to use my phone to put that back in. Excellent.
See how other people are seeing. I'll give you a moment. Some more. And again, on that QR code on the screen or that bit.ly link, if you would be willing to, that would be awesome. Let's see if it's coming up. Oh, yeah, people can be adding pictures. Oh, I see people adding pictures. Nice.
I see words.
And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share that with everybody so we can watch together. Oh, great. Thank you so much, people, for putting words in. I see some pictures. Oh, I see the pictures are getting stuck. A dog. Somebody sees a dog in there. That's awesome.
It is a dog. If you see it more than one way, go ahead and put a second image up also.
Oh, I see another one down there. I'll drag these up. It's very interesting how people are seeing it. Oh, a couple people saw the boxes with the two, the little pair there. The rose. Boy. I don't know today. This is a session where we're doing neuroscience, and I see more people are joining. This is really interesting. Jen, even with a few responses, we're seeing a number of different ways people are seeing it. Diagonal from top left to bottom right, 2 by 2 in the corner. A lot of different ways to see the dots. And I encourage people to remember that no matter how you think you see it, it may or may not be the same as somebody else sees it, which is just a reality. That's who we are. We see things differently. One of the best things we know in neuroscience is that our brains are not all the same. We are very, very uniquely different. Matter of fact, if you're thinking about how we're uniquely different, like all of our thumbprints are unique. Now, matter of fact, you can be tied to a crime based on your fingerprints. So your fingerprints tie you as a unique individual to whatever your fingerprints are on. So, you know, like the messy mess maybe you made in the kitchen, my mom's going to go through that. Whatever it is, it's tied to you. You're a unique person. Similarly, your brain and how it's been growing and how it grew, just like trees are all different. They might look the same, but they're all unique. We are all uniquely different in our brains and how we see things, how we do things, how we work. Similarities for sure, but we are uniquely different. Just like thumbprints or fingerprints, they look alike, but they are uniquely different. And that means we see things and we operate things differently. And thinking about that, Jen, isn't it true that we engage differently in how we engage because of our brains, and our brains are all different?
We do. It is that background that we come with, and our experiences and opportunities that we've had provide different lenses for us and how we engage, and the pieces that we pay attention to and what our brains determine are important can really be unique and different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So different.
Yes.
And how we want to engage. Matter of fact, here's one, for example, like what goes in your brain when you're thinking about joining in. So I'll give you a minute on the chat here. What goes through your brain when you're thinking about joining in on something? Like even right now, do I type in the chat box? What goes through your brain?
I'll start with, oh no, I have to take an action. What goes through your mind when you're deciding to join in? Maybe you're sitting in a meeting. I'm sitting at a district meeting or in a staff meeting, and I'm thinking about somebody. Am I going to share my comment? What goes through your mind when you're thinking about it? I'll wait.
Oh, how does mine compare? Maybe Michael, yours is like mine. I wait for a little bit and then I wonder. And also, how much effort do I put in and what kind of words do I say? Yeah. How will my responses be received? Oh, you guys know it. You know it. Oh, how's it going to land?
Is it going to add to the conversation?
Absolutely. It's almost like it's not just our experiences, but it's our values and it's our wonderings and it's where we are even in the moment. And where we are in the moment because of our life, we're all different. Not only our brains are different, but just all of the thoughts and the experiences that are coming to the table right now, every day, we're all different. So embracing that neurodiversity is really interesting, especially if you think about the ways that we're trying to invite people to engage or the way that we might want to engage. It's both on the end of the participant and the lead, if you would, like who's calling out the engagement and who's the individual, what are they doing? We are all universally different in how we want to engage and how we do engage and how we receive engagement ploys or welcomes or invitations. What is my comment? Will it be valued? Yes, Carmen, your comment there is valued because you're exactly right. How does it relate back to us as individuals? So not only we are diverse in our brain's neurodiversity in how we want to engage and how we could engage or we're accepted, our brain says this is okay to engage. We're also diverse in our representations. Jen, tell me more about representations. What do you mean by that? Like, how are we diverse in our representations?
So I was actually noticing it in the chat that we were already touching on the subject because we're already talking about how will my comment be valued and how will I share that comment? Am I going to share it verbally? Am I going to share it written? Am I going to draw a diagram and try to make it a picture for someone to understand? But what is that representation, or how am I taking in that information too? How is the information coming into me? Am I reading a spreadsheet or something like that? Or am I looking at a presentation by a student panel? So what is the representation of how the information is coming into me? How we access that and what we can do. Not all representations work for all folks. If you are, not able to access written text for any reason, or if you're not able to access oral, then that representation may not work for you. So we're how our needs, our language.
How we represent with language, with pictures, different ways, and it's also which ways we're most familiar with and what we go to, what we like the most. Like if I asked, or I were asked to go ahead and sing a quick song about how the week was for me, like don't do that for me. That doesn't work for my representations. My brain's not really strong in that, and that causes a lot of other issues in my brain. But how we represent things and how we understand representations, we're all diverse. You ask people to draw a picture of what it looks like in the workflow of what's going on around your office or in your space or with other people, or how education works or how things happen. You will be amazed in how we represent it differently. It's quite interesting. So speaking of which, is there a preferred way that you like to receive information? Like what kind of representations do you prefer? And we'll invite you to do that in the chat again. How do you prefer to get your info? Text with image, visuals and graphs, bullet points. I didn't see anybody said email was their first go-to.
Or text messages. I didn't see those either.
They're being more general. Conversations, activities, reading. Oh, Amy, really interesting about that with quiet time to process. Yeah, very important that our brains need time to process, and we all are different in how much time we want to process. And some people might want to do it more verbally, the processing, and some people might want to do it very quietly.
And Josie is in bringing out the idea of facial expression, so the idea of body language. And I know that would have been a challenge this past year. But thinking about body language and how much information that conveys, that's not even the facts necessarily, but how you're conveying what you think about that through your body language.
Yep. Lots of great points in there, and tone of voice. That's even how you represent your passion, the emotion, the meaning behind things. Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can represent things. Another one, we're also diverse in our actions and representations or expressions, how we express who we are, how we act, and how we need to get engaged in the action. And by the way, all of these overlap a lot. And if you're thinking these might sound familiar, like universal design for learning, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Is these are different ways that we can think about the ways of our brain, or the different systems of our brain as learners, and that's adult learners and as kids as well. And that last one, we are diverse in our actions, how we act, and how we express who we are, how we express our feelings, how we express our facial emotions, all of that. We express, because we're human beings, differently. We're similar, yet different. Speaking of which, how do you prefer to express or communicate? And let's do it in the chat, and let's not say the chat, because it's kind of funny, Jen, to think about. The chat is how we're asking people to express how they would prefer to express. So how do you prefer to express? I'm curious.
I'm curious too if anyone has a difference in how they like to express their communication versus how they like to receive their communication too. Follow the chat. Shared experiences through analogies. Oh, I love analogies. Thinking about making those connections to the learning and the experiences you already have. And connecting them to stories.
Michael was saying the think, pair, share, sharing with a group of two. I know for me, I appreciate just being able to get my initial thoughts out with somebody else and hear feedback before I share with the whole group. That's a preference thing. It looks like Amy is similar, small group or with a partner, and then with people. Oh, you got some writers, verbals.
Lots of different ways to express and communicate. I'm not seeing anyone say like a video chat or a video piece, but to share their communication video.
Yeah, I wonder what that would look like. And I think some people like to do that. Interesting. So let's take a moment and think about this. If everybody's different in their brains and how they process things and how they want to engage and how they engage and how they represent things and how their actions and expressions, if we're all different in our brains, like we're different with our fingerprints, but similar, I mean, what are the benefits and challenges with this? So let's take a moment and think about that. What are some benefits and challenges? And in particular, in your role and what you do and who you are, what are some benefits and challenges with this diversity with our brains, that neurodiversity? Jen, I'm thinking about, for me in my classroom, I was 17 years at Ferris High School, and boy, I think I know what I'm doing, but they're diverse. There were some real benefits that they were all diverse and some real challenges.
I'm thinking about my time at the ESD and working in teaching and learning and all the different ways that we come together and all the different lenses and ways that we communicate and how we can be stronger together. But we each come with different ways of sharing.
Looking here in the chat, challenge, it's hard to reach everybody at once. You can't. Or can you? And how do you do that? I mean, but you got to embrace the neurodiversity, even if you're going to reach everybody at once. Meet the many needs at the same time. It makes me think about, like with Cindy and Amanda's challenges, they call it out, like how do we think about the people that we work with? And how do we get to that meta part where I'm thinking about what works that's similar, like fingerprints, we all have them, but we're different. So how do we think about the part that's similar? Oh, look at all these benefits. New ways.
New ways to open the doors to new ideas and ways of thinking.
Building empathy, deeper conversations and connections. Oh, Emma's got an interesting comment about that. How do you make sure that people are seen and heard equally and contribute equally, that they're valued appropriately? And Emma, it's also one of those things too, like I don't want to talk too much, but I do want to talk some. So how do I manage that when I don't want to talk maybe as much as somebody else might want to, or I don't want to be in the front as much as somebody else might want to, because we're all diverse even in that and how we value it. Look at all of this. Jen, any other things in the chat you see to call out?
Well, I'm looking at the encourage to grow, the benefit of neurodiversity and that encouragement to grow. And I'm thinking as we engage and as we work with each other, we also try on new things and try different things. So we always are growing too, but that connection to expanding our ways of knowing and expanding how we share. I would have never dreamed I'd be doing this kind of work a couple of years ago, but here we are. And so you're always learning. And that's one of the things I think is amazing to me about the brain. And all of this is happening in the span of minutes that our brains are making these decisions and we're deciding on comfort. We're deciding on our ability to jump in and our ability to share. And this is all just happening in mere moments inside of a meeting.
Yeah.
And almost without us thinking about it. It's almost autonomous.
Isn't that amazing? Our brains are spectacular. All right, so Josie, Jen, I was reading Josie's comment. Jen, I think we have a video next, and I really appreciate this. And I think this is from Kaimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Is that her last name?
Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
She's got a great presentation that she did. And we're going to take 2 minutes out of this. It's called The Danger of the Single Story. And by the way, all of these, the slides and the presentation are going to be recorded and available to you afterwards. But let's take a moment. And Jen, would you give me a thumbs up if the audio comes through nicely? Let's see what she's sharing about the danger of a single story.
I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals.
So interesting, the danger of a single story. Jen, I think about this as educators in our work that I do. If we only have a single story, if we're not embracing neurodiversity, it can be really catastrophic in many different ways. Jen, can you give us a little more to think on here? The danger of a single story.
So thinking of the danger of the single story, what it highlights for me is we come with our own perspective, and you can see from the list in our chat all the different ways that we come to a meeting or come to an event with the lenses that we come to. And when we presume to think that everyone sees the world the same way we do, when we create that single story, there's danger in that our information and our messages may get lost and may not get fully transferred. So really knowing our audiences and knowing the others that are in the spaces that we can and leaning into those conversations really does help us get beyond that single story and get beyond that single narrative that we might be telling ourselves, and creating those opportunities in our classrooms and in our meetings.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. And I bet you that everybody has probably some of their stories about the danger of a single story. If you've had enough time in a classroom, you know that, or enough time with people. We have to be careful. And that's that part of we want to embrace neurodiversity. So as we're thinking about, again, embracing neurodiversity, and we're gonna dig into more about what this looks like, but we're going to move into another section of our time together. But first, let's close up just a little bit where we looked at about embracing neurodiversities. We're thinking about embracing neurodiversity with our engagement, with our representations, and with our actions and expressions. So we'll invite you to think about how would you incorporate neurodiversity into your practice. So we're going to do a Padlet. And this Padlet link, again, is it's a different one than we started with. And we're going to use this one through the rest of our time together today to think about how do we reflect on these ABCs of brain growth. And as Jen and I are bringing it together today, we're thinking, A, embrace neurodiversity. That's the very first thing. Remember that we're all different, even though we're really similar. And so how might we incorporate neurodiversity in our practice? And in particular, how might you do that in your practice, or might we in general do that? So when you go to the Padlet, which you can grab the QR code off your phone, and I think the link is right there in the chat as well, you can go ahead and post in the Padlet. Let's give you just a moment to reflect. Your brain needs some space to reflect. We'll give you some private space to do so. Reflect and go ahead and put something in the Padlet if you want. We invite you to do so. You don't have to, but it would enrich the rest of our perspectives if you did. People are putting lots of things in the Padlet. This is awesome.
This is going to be a great artifact to have after the session. You can save a Padlet as a PDF. And so when we're finished, we'll invite you all to save it, and you'll have a PDF that you can have of all the different resources and ideas that are shared from this group.
Look at that. We've already got people in the next sections, Jen. We have these other columns. It totally is awesome that they're thinking about fueling brain growth, which is going to be our next section. And then how do we overcome obstacles? Those are the three parts we're looking at today. If you have stuff that you want to share, it fits in any of those columns, you feel free to do so. And I love what's already here. I'm going to take some time to do some reading too.
Yeah. I'm reading about staff development. There's a participant who leans in each year. They come back and they learn from each other.
The true colors. That's like Norm Klug, if I remember right. Oh, and people are also sharing resources. Feel free to add to this. This is going to be our general notes page for our time. And let's take one more minute to add anything to this Padlet if you want to now or later. You can keep it open in a tab. And we invite you to go ahead and read as well. One more minute.
Okay. I'm seeing someone wrote name it and claim it, make it part of everyday conversation. And that hits the heart of neuroscience for me, because we need to be able to explain it and know it, so that it creates a lens for all the work that we do. Because when we understand that we're all different, then creating those multiple means of expression and multiple means of engagement are so necessary and such a part of the work.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. So as we're thinking about how do we support adult learning, what's going on in our brains, we've got to embrace neurodiversity. That's the very first part. Embrace neurodiversity. As was mentioned, the UDL guidelines are a wonderful dive if you're thinking about, hey, how do I be mindful of the differences with neurodiversity? UDL guidelines are wonderful. It's a free resource that's out there. I'm guessing many, if not all of us, have been diving into this. And just to remind you that this is all about how our brains are similar but different. And I really appreciate the different ways that the UDL guidelines help us really practically to think about embracing neurodiversity in our work. All right, so we're going to do a quick brain break. You need a brain break. I know you've been in here forever. Your brain is actually probably a little exhausted, but it needs space. So we know with Neuroscience ABCs, we need some breaks. And so we're going to do a quick off you go. Off you go is a routine that works really well, especially digitally, but works physically as well. So off you go in a moment. But first, how does the image show a reaction? The word for today is reaction. Jen, I'll invite you, because I haven't heard yours on this. I just picked the picture. How do you see this image shows a reaction?
I see a potential reaction when I look at this, but I'm thinking that someone is going to jump.
Ooh,
I think
jump.
Someone's going to jump at the noise.
I see some interesting other things. I see potential, but I see a reaction like the air in the balloon is lighter than the air around, so it's floating. So I'm seeing a hovering reaction. And I also see my brain hurt seeing that pin so close to the balloon. That's my reaction. And I don't know if that's what this was about. But our word for today is reaction. So we're going to invite you to do this and take a break. So you're going to go. So you're going to get up from your computer and you're going to go walk about, go do something. We're going to give a 5-minute break to do this. Find something that you believe shows a reaction, whatever that is, however you see it. And I'm leveraging the neurodiversity bit right now because I'm hoping that your thing that you see as a reaction is different than how I see the reaction or a reaction. So go find something and then would you capture it? Now, I know some of you are great drawers and you like to draw real quick, and that'd be awesome. Or you want to take a photo, that would be amazing if you could do that. Take a picture is probably easiest for most of us. And we'd invite you to go ahead and post it. Now, you might be Padleted out after our session, but I think if we just practice it, we'll be really good and fluid with it. And I do invite you to go ahead and post it. I'll put the Jen will into the chat there, the actual bit.ly if you prefer that way. But you can do it right from your phone. You can go take a picture, then you can come back to the screen when you're ready, and you could QR code it and upload your image and put a description in there. Go ahead and describe it. What do you see with reaction? Oh, but nonetheless, you get 5 minutes to go break. Off you go for 5 minutes. My clock says 1:33, so 1:38. You need a break. Go stretch. Off you go. Go find something that's a reaction. See if you can capture it and bring it back to us.
I think when I was growing up, we used to, my parents used to speak in French, and they would have conversations in French so that we wouldn't understand. So, and as soon as I got in middle school, I started taking French class.
That's a good way to go. I like it. Well, I invite all of you to make your way back to your computer if you're within earshot. We're going to get started here in just a moment. And if you haven't done it already and you would like to, the QR code is up. Feel free to use the QR code, and it's also in the chat box to share your off you go. By the way, super cool if you turn your camera off in an application like Zoom or even Hopin, you can use your camera in Padlet to upload things, which is awesome. Just for a heads up. And it looks like there are a few things in there. Jen, that was a fun break for the brain. I'm going to share out real quickly the reaction Padlet. People are welcome to keep sharing in it. The fresh wax, the fan, the toddler. I'm liking all of those ideas. Ooh, and then I don't know what that thing is. Oh, and then we've got some more coming in. This is great. This is great. And if we could, and maybe Trin will help us in a second, how would we, Trin, get the person who put the drink? Just seeing this creates a reaction thirst. How can we get them to share out their audio? Is that doable?
If they have the button that says share at the top of their, then if they click on it, then they'll send us a request.
Gotcha. Yeah. So whoever did the toddler mask or the thirst cup, would you invite yourself to share your audio? That'd be really great to hear your voice. And while we wait for that, if that works out, I'm just reading all the stuff that's there. A fishing rod. Oh, that looks like a reaction. Oh, I'm curious about that reaction. And I'm curious if you're fishing right now
I did the
outside.
toddler mask.
Oh, you did? Go ahead.
Me.
Go for it. Oh, it's Josie, the toddler mask. Well, what's the reaction?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you, Josie.
Can you hear me? Weird.
Okay, this is all fun with new tech. All right. Jen's working on it. Well, while we're doing that, just encourage you to think about all the different ways we see the word reaction, or what's a reaction. The melting of the ice cream, especially on a hot summer day. The practice, the reminder you see your instrument, it causes a reaction. Could be a potential reaction if you don't read the sign on the fresh wax. The whole dog thing, even saying the word W-A-L-K that I'm not allowed to say when the creature is next to me in the same room. Yeah, spelling it the outside, etc. That's so true for us. Wonderful. So that was a quick brain break, and I'm mindful that we've got a lot of cool ways that we see things differently. We are really different in the way that we see things, in the way that we do things. And now we're moving into not just the neuroscience about embracing neurodiversities, but now we're thinking about what are those reactions to help us to fuel brain growth. So let's think together about making our brains grow. How do we help our brains grow in a positive way? How do we do that? And how do we do that with our colleagues? How do we do it at the ESD or at the school district building or in our rooms or wherever it is that we are as human beings? How do we help fuel brain growth? All right, so take a deep breath. Here are 4 pictures. Which one doesn't belong? When your brain looks at these 4 pictures, I'll give you a moment to think critically. Which one would you say doesn't belong? We've got the picture of 2 people jumping off a cliff in the top left into the water. We've got a picture of, it looks like some garden snakes or ribbon snakes there in the top right. The bottom left, it looks like a green screen room where there's some students who are doing some filming. And the bottom right, we've got a scuba diver with some fish in the deep blue. Which one doesn't belong to you? And go ahead and everybody's doing it already. Put it in the chat. And then would you also give your explanation? And if you already put it before, like snakes, I see snakes don't belong for a few people. Would you explain why snakes don't belong for you? I'll give you a moment. Amanda, they all seem to belong. They all can promote anxiety attacks. Interesting. Green screen. Jesse sees the green screen doesn't belong. Not outside. It's not a natural setting.
Snakes because there's no people.
Yep. All of these different things.
Eric says because the green screen looks more fun than the potential danger in the others.
More fun than potential. Does he mean potential fun danger? I'm wondering about that. Some people consider danger a fun thing. I'm just curious. All right. I know what, though, Jen. When each one of these doesn't belong for different reasons, depending on our perspectives, that's for sure. Like Michael's calling the 2 jumping off the cliff. 2 jumping, instead of 2 in the group. It's different ways of seeing it. This is an engagement or a hook type of activity. Maybe you've seen before, maybe you haven't. Which one doesn't belong? In Mathland, we use that a lot. Which one doesn't belong? To start initiating conversation and perspective. So really leverage this neurodiversity thing because we see things differently and we believe things differently because that's just being human. Speaking of which, fueling our brain growth, Jen, if we're going to fuel our brain growth and we're embracing neurodiversity, what's this very first thing? Engage in directed play. What do we mean by that? How's that going to help?
When we think about engaging in directed play, we're really supporting that curiosity, and our brains are naturally curious and naturally investigative and seeking that exploration, even though some of us don't think cliffs would be the way to investigate that. But we're looking at how we direct that play and how we organize the thinking. And when we make it playful, we find those opportunities for fun. Engaging that exploration around ideas and concepts and always learning. Our brains seek to learn and make understanding. And I think you've got treasure struggle up here. This is one of my favorites. How many of us like crossword puzzles or engaging in those activities where we, are trying to solve? How many like escape rooms? That would be a great example. We treasure that struggle and that opportunity to learn. But when we engage in those things, we're growing our brain. We're creating those neural pathways and making connections to our past and to to future activities that we might do.
Yeah, Jen, I'm with you on that. This directed play, all of the research says, especially for little ones, and then you realize it's for all of us. Our brains need directed play. Play is good, but if you give me a little direction, and I like how you called out crossword or a puzzle or something that we're doing, and even like in the picture here, when the kids are given some tools in a place, you're helping to direct their attention to something and let them play. It's the same is true for us as adults. Give me a new program, a computer program, or better yet, give me a drone and say, hey, Jeff, we're thinking about using this. Could you figure it out? I'm like, oh, my brain is going to light up and support that curiosity and exploration. It's really healthy for my brain to grow when we do those things. Yeah, engage in directed play.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, Jen. We did this Which One Doesn't Belong, and I was reflecting on that as a hook type of activity or a launch type of activity. And I'm wondering, is this part of engaging in directed play? I'm wondering, did we engage them in directed, quote, play?
I would say we did, because we created curiosity as everyone looked at the images and decided for themselves what they were. And then they started exploring their images and almost, I imagine, placing themselves in those images. Were they in front of that green screen or making that connection? So we were creating those opportunities to do that. And then they were struggling. We asked them to think about which one doesn't belong. So the cognitive struggle was there, and to support their answer with a why. Why do I feel this one doesn't belong? So we created that struggle and we activated some different pathways for that.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. And part of that is giving space and time. You need space and time to do directed play. That's just the reality.
How many people get lost when they're gardening or doing a home construction project and suddenly the evening's over?
Yep. I'm with you on that. All right. So first we had engage in directed play. All right, what's this thing? Executive functions and exercise. Obviously, I'm thinking here, if you're going to fuel brain growth, we're going to have to do some workouts. So what do you mean, Jen? Exercise executive functions.
Well, this is our self-awareness. So we're aware of where we are in our spaces and aware of where we are in our in a meeting, like we were talking about in the first section. What's happening around us? What is the environment that we're in? What experiences are we coming with? What experiences have we had at that space when we've been there before, when we've attended a district meeting or when we've sat in a PLC? We're coming in with that self-awareness of our own knowledge, and then also with our experiences in those spaces, thinking about how we're problem solving in our working memory. We have working memory, to me, is one of the it's an amazing piece because it's something that only holds information for about 10-15 minutes as your brain plays with it. And then it's trying to decide, what am I going to do with this information? Am I going to keep it in long term, or am I just going to use this? You might see this like in a math class. When I'm teaching math or in a classroom, I might give my students a math problem and they're going to know the numbers while they're working with their math problem, and they're going to hold that information for a few minutes. But then when they leave, they may remember the process, but they won't remember those numbers. Those numbers will have left working memory. So that idea of having something that's short-term, thinking about our emotional self-regulation. Self-regulation is something that comes a little bit later for us. Doesn't typically develop until we're about 25 that we are fully self-regulated. And it can be difficult for students. Or adults, how do we scaffold that regulation for others? And self-motivation, how do we create those opportunities to internalize and become those lifelong learners? And to be motivated to know more and to create that. So, and through ownership, Also, our planning and our problem solving when we engage in those higher order thinking skills. All of these executive functionings are happening at the same time. That cognitive flexibility when you play with an idea, creativity, so looking at fluency and elaboration opportunities when we create a number of ideas or we play with ideas in different ways, and those ideas of how we elaborate on different ideas. And also our attention when we need to stay and attend to a task. How can we develop and have those executive function skills that help us stay on our task and attend that motivation piece?
Jen, it sounds exactly like exercise. Like my brain needs this workout to grow. And I know that you're going to talk more. We're going to look at this executive functions in the last part when we talk about overcoming obstacles. But if we're really going to fuel brain growth, it's healthy to think about our brains a lot like a muscle. They're not muscles, but they grow similarly. And one of the things you have to do is exercise them. So exercising our executive functions, all of these type of things is really important. So positioning your learners, the people that you work with, like even in, I'm just wondering, like in this which one doesn't belong, in the which one doesn't belong, we wanted to help you exercise your executive functions by making a choice. You had to choose which one didn't belong. And you had to do some comparing and contrasting. All of these are executive functions, and we wanted to make sure that you were in a position that you could exercise that, because that helps your growth of your brain. And that's what we're wanting to do today with our time. So thinking of that, I'm also thinking to fuel your brain growth, we know that there's these connections, these pathways. And it's really interesting that you can connect, create, and strengthen neural pathways. I mean, yes, first you create them. Those synapses fire. And by the way, you need lots of mistakes. It's like thinking about building muscles. You got to push it until your brain's like, oh, that happened. And if you didn't know about mistakes, there's a lot of great research around how mistakes are important for us. Just like in muscle work, you got to push yourself until you fail. Your brains love mistakes because they're trying to make connections. And if you can create a pathway, a neural pathway, that's that aha, your brain's making sense of it. Then you can start connecting them to other neural pathways or even strengthen them. It's really important that your brain is connected to lots of other things, and that you use those brain pathways over and over again that are important, and they get connected with other brain pathways. So seek multiple perspectives is a great thing to do, like in our Which One Doesn't Belong. How do you see it differently? Because remember, embracing neurodiversity, we want to leverage the differences that we have, even though we are very similar as human beings. Using various perspectives and representations is super helpful for my brain, especially if you share with me your representation and my brain doesn't understand it. It forces my brain and your brain to both work to try to make more sense of the situation, which is what we did in the Which One Doesn't Belong. Oh, and we have a cool video for this one. I'm going to hit mute on my mic, so hopefully it doesn't echo. Jen, will you give me a thumbs up if the sound comes through pretty good?
Whether it's math, foreign language.
We had a no video or no audio?
No audio, but it was coming on at the very end, so it might just
It must be lag. Okay, I will come right back here.
In order to learn anything, whether it's math,
We're still missing the sound.
I will try that one more time. Speaking of mistakes and learning from mistakes and executive functions, we are doing all of that right now.
The good news is our brains are always rewiring and we're always learning.
All right, let's try one more time.
what's going on in the brain when you learn? In order to learn anything, whether it's math, a foreign language, guitar, or how to dribble a basketball, you need to create and strengthen pathways in your brain. Think about shooting a free throw. Know that feeling when you've got it down and don't even have to think about it? That's muscle memory. Here's the thing. Muscle memory lives in the brain, not the muscles. Your brain controls everything your muscles do, and it does this by activating specific neural pathways for each and every movement. These are functional pathways, neurons working together to achieve a goal. Say you're learning how to shoot a free throw. If it's your first time doing it, you don't yet have a pathway for that movement in your brain. You need to create it. Let's use an analogy to look at what's happening in the brain during this time. When you're first learning, your brain is like a forest full of trees and dense foliage. with no clear pathway between point A and point B. As you learn the mechanics of shooting a free throw, you create a trail through the forest. Now you can shoot the free throw because you've created that pathway in your brain, but you probably don't make many shots because it's so new. The pathway isn't very clear yet. In order to improve your free throw, you need to refine and strengthen the free throw pathway in your brain. The way you do that is through practice. Practice gradually widens the trail through the trees, turning it into a dirt road between A and B. You're starting to get pretty good now. You're making more free throws than not. You don't have to think about the mechanics as much. That's because the pathway gets stronger after each practice rep. And you've done a lot of reps. With even more practice, the dirt road turns into a paved road connecting A and B, allowing information to be transmitted at a faster rate. Now you're a 70% free throw shooter, and when you step up to the line, you don't even have to think about it. Eventually, with enough practice, what started as a trail has become a full-blown highway. Now you're a master, draining almost every free throw, and the movement is completely second nature. Scientists call this plasticity, and it's your brain's innate ability to create and strengthen connections between neurons. These connections.
Jen, thanks for that good video on there. And I love the quote from Amanda, neurons that fire together, wire together. So important for us to be mindful of that we can create neural pathways. And it doesn't have to be with basketball. It could be with technology or understanding how to relate to each other, or even as little toddlers when they put their superhero mask on, what it is you can do for imagination and creativity. We start creating these neural pathways, and remember, we can create them, we can strengthen them, and we can connect them. Jen, I love the tidbit that I heard a little bit ago around the geniuses like an Albert Einstein, like people who are your like respectable geniuses. When they were doing the brain scans, because they're either alive and we can do that now, or they're dead and we can analyze them, the geniuses happen to have more neural connectivity across regions of their brain than a typical brain person, because they're making those connections, and how good that is for our brain to make those connections as well, and not only do the one thing all the time. Very important for us.
Yeah, the brain is fascinating. There are taxi drivers in England, you may have heard about them, that they have to take a test, and they actually have larger parts of their brain because they access maps and directions. They're actually change the physical attributes of their brain. So your brain actually is pretty flexible and creates a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that hippocampus, you can actually exercise it and grow it. It's the one part of your brain you can see, we can scan it and see the brain getting bigger because you exercise it. It's pretty awesome. Well, fueling brain growth, we got lots of options of things that we can be doing and seeing. The fourth one is go meta. Going meta is really important for our brain growth. Jen, can you give us a little reason why going meta is helpful for us, or what we can do to go meta?
I have to go little.
Oh, you got to go meta with your meta.
Go meta with my meta. So this is that where you're thinking about your thinking, and you're starting to think about what you already might know about a particular topic. You know, what am I thinking about as I go into a space? You know, the first time you go into a PLC or into a meeting and you're going to share a new process or a new initiative that you're working on, what are you thinking about that, and what are you making those connections to? And then as you learn and as you sit around in the meeting and you're engaging with different people, you might start to think about your thinking and explain your thinking, and you might hear other people explaining their brain's thinking. And so then you start to revise your thinking, because now you've got your own input and your own information, and now you're starting to hear from others. And so you're starting to plan and monitor and process and access all this understanding, and your brain starts to make a new image. And just like that video we just watched, that pathway gets broader and broader, and the more connections you make.
Yeah, going meta is super important. And that time to reflect, time to think about somebody else's thinking. Oh, and Jen, that sounds a lot like embracing neurodiversity, because if I have to explain my thinking to you and you aren't seeing the world exactly like I see it, you will see when my representations and my words and understanding of the situation doesn't quite make sense to you. And it might be perfect sense in my brain, but you help clarify my thinking, and I can help challenge and clarify your thinking. And any of those type of activities, whether it's in the classroom or with staff mates, or whether it's in your region or whatever it is you're doing, like I'm thinking, Jen and I are at different education service districts. I'm thinking about our teaching and learning department of working through ideas and plans. When we go meta and we get to reflect and explain our thinking to each other and share our thinking, it helps our brains make sense of things and clarify our thinking. It's so good for us.
One of my favorite strategies is our protocols is something called the muddiest point, and to ask someone in a meeting, what was the thing that was the most unclear to you? What was the muddiest point in what I just shared? And asking someone to articulate what was their muddiest point and to gather that, and then you can clarify from there and seek to understand. Pretty
Awesome. Jen, I'm thinking about this fueling our brain growth, and it sounded a lot like, directed play. It's like my exercising my muscles and all of that. I'm going like, okay, strengthen these things. And then I go to meta, and I'm laughing right now because our muscles don't think about themselves as muscles, but our brains think about themselves as brains. And that's one of the coolest things we can do, and really purposefully grow our brains when we go meta. And lastly, of our 5 things to really think about for fueling brain growth, as we're trying to do a quick session today about how do we do the ABCs, mental rest is of utmost importance. And this one is a lot like your muscles. Jen, if we go out and we're planning to run a triathlon or do a triathlon or run a marathon, and we're going to do that, and we just go with our muscles, we will break down our muscles. My wife's a runner, and she's got lots of friends who are runners, and they're like, oh, my legs. And they go to the doctor like, you didn't rest, did you? No. Or you need the rest, and your brain needs the rest as well. So Jen, we need sleep, right?
We definitely have to have sleep, at least 8 hours.
And the sleep's good because our brains are still working while we're sleeping, and it's putting together those pieces. If you don't believe it and don't believe the research, don't you remember that one time you walked away from a test or from a circumstance or conversation, and it was hours later that your brain goes, and you're like, I forgot to do that one thing. I forgot. Oh, why did I say it that way? Your brain is still processing all of the data and the experiences and the things that have been happening. So remember that.
I think the new thing for me is to wake up at 2 a.m. and go, oh, I forgot to write this on my to-do list.
And so, Dan, what you're saying too is sometimes it's a physical space or a space away from it. Your brain just needs processing time because it's still processing, even though what we might call like your intrinsic cognitive load where you're focusing, you might not be thinking about it, but your brain is still trying to process all of this stuff that's going on and make sense of the world. It's very important to do reflection. That going meta is part of the rest. You need to stop working out for a second and give your brain some space to rest, to put the things together, to determine. Oh, by the way, Jen, there's that cool layer of the chaos management neural network. Like there's a whole network of neurons to help manage how chaotic things are in your brain, to help your brain grow in the right way and to do some cleanup stuff. Reflection is a good tool to help do that. And also being mindful about your cognitive load. When you get tired because you've been doing that really intense problem for a while, your brain needs a rest with it. Be mindful and don't just keep putting data. Like that rest, Jenna, confession time. If you give me a brain break and you're like, hey, go take a brain break, I am really bad at grabbing my phone and reading the news or putting more info into my brain when my brain probably just needs a downtime. Could you give me a little wisdom, Jen, or anything with that? I would really like it.
For me, it's stepping outside. It really is just walking away or finding stairs, anything that's physical. Sometimes in the classroom, you may have used, I used to help students who needed to move large, heavy objects just to kind of help give them some movement. And so I would have a note or something that I would pass to a student, have them deliver it to the office, but just shift entirely away and to give a student something else to do, or even give yourself something to do. Maybe go up and down a flight of stairs, or deliver a note card to someone else. Stop by and put a sticky note on somebody's desk telling them how great they've been, or done something for you. But really just shifting away entirely from the activity you've been in. And just give yourself that break.
And others. And if you're in a position of leadership and you're working with other people, be mindful that they need breaks. What about the one, Jen, like if I'm doing a staff meeting and I know students come into the classroom at 8 o'clock Should I go the staff meeting to like 7:58, giving them just enough time to run to their classroom?
No, we need to empty the working memory. We really need to give folks an opportunity to clear their working memory so that they're ready to absorb when they get into the space where they're going to be doing that work. So whether you give them 5 minutes and give them a chance to walk between spaces, or you end with a funny meme, or find something that speaks to the group that you're working in, but give them a chance to empty that working memory.
Awesome. And I see Carmen is right on board with us, and we're going to do this as we think about fueling brain growth. Let's take some time right now for you to give yourself some space to go ahead and consolidate your thinking and think about how might we fuel brain growth. And Carmen, I love that you put it in the chat there. If you want to repeat or copy and paste it, that would be great too. We're going to use our same Padlet notes page. The QR code's up on the screen there, so you could use your phone, or it's in the chat if you want to use the chat link right there. Let's give ourselves a little bit of space right now to think about fueling brain growth. How might you fuel brain growth, or how might we fuel brain growth in the environments or the situations we are in? All right, Jen, I'm thinking about breaks and needing brain breaks and all of that. And boy, we focused on fueling brain growth for like 30 minutes, and it just flies by so quickly. So I think we have a brain break again. And what's this dealio? I see the pictures. Could you help us?
Well, I'm going to try to help. I'm not very good at it though, but I think this is one of the things I love to do is brain breaks help to also create dopamine opportunities. And when you feel good, dopamine is one of those things that helps to make you feel good and to create laughter and to create levity and can kind of give your brain a break and also change the environment. And so imagine that we're all sitting in a physical room together, and we could all see each other trying to do this. Okay. So if you're able, go ahead and stand up. Okay. And I'm going to have you put your left hand, it may look like my right hand on my screen, but this is my left hand, I promise. Put your left hand in front of you, palm out, and move your hand just up and down. Okay. And just slowly up and down. Okay. I'm going to have you stop and put that hand down. I'm going to have you put your right hand out and palm out and go left and right. Move your hand sideways. Okay, now I'm going to have you put that hand down. Okay, shake it out. And we're going to bring them both up. And now I want you to try to do both at the same time. Your left hand up and down and your right hand, yeah. Jeff, you're killing it.
Oh, I gotta try the other way. That one hurts my brain. I'm not even practicing. I've been doing this. My parents made me do this too much as a kid. You get dinner if you can do this. No.
Is that how it worked?
Nope. I'm just practicing.
So imagine now that we're all standing around in a conference room, and we're all trying to do this together. The laughter and the humor, and try and switch it. Try and do it the other way. But this is a nice little brain break away from the neuroscience, away from language, and we're just creating with an action. You're so
It's going left and right. I'm trying up and down.
You are, and you're ambidextrous at this. You can do this with both and switch to the right hand up and down.
I'm trying. I know that I have to practice it, and I know it's good for my brain. It's creating new neural pathways, new neural connections, and strengthening them, and it's hurting my brain. Okay.
It's making me think of when you pat your head, rub your tummy?
Yep.
Same kind of idea.
Lots of fun ones on there. And I appreciate that the energizing brain breaks link that you have there. Jen, thank you for putting that in the chat too, because I know you have those.
It's on its way.
Sweet. Lots of great brain breaks. This is healthy for your brain. If you're going to fuel brain growth, remember, we're going to embrace neurodiversity. These are really crucial, the ABCs of neuroscience. Remember, your brain is a lot like a muscle. It's not a muscle, but if you're going to think about it as that metaphor or analogy, and you're thinking like, what can I do to help me understand my brain? Remember, your muscles need rest and they need refueling. Your brain does too. Your brain really does. It needs that space to do so. All right, and then our last of our sections. Last section is overcoming obstacles, because guess what? If you didn't know, there are things that get in the way of our brain growth. If we're going to embrace neurodiversity, we're going to fuel brain growth. We also need to think about how do we overcome obstacles. So Jen, okay, I think I'm ready for this section.
Well, you were talking about your wife as a runner, and I don't know if anybody's had a chance to really look at that picture that was just on the screen.
That's pretty cool. Those runners are hurdling over little RAM slots or something for a computer.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. Just kind of a overcoming obstacles, and sometimes technology is the obstacle to overcome. But thinking about the external, we often think about external obstacles that we have, but there's also the internal obstacles and the opportunities that we have. And so neuroscience is showing us that it's much more complex, and then it's those experiences and opportunities that our brains have. And so we want to spend some time talking in terms of three different resources, three different in our brain, those three different systems. And the first one of them is the reticular activating system, which we're going to talk about here in a second. The second one is amygdala. I wasn't sure which order they were going to come up in. Amygdala. And also we're going to talk about the prefrontal cortex. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these three systems influence the experiences that we've had, the opportunities that we've had, and some of the constraints and opportunities within those systems. So everybody ready? Here we go. So reticular activating system. This one I like to think of as the sentry and the concierge. This system, there are so many different things that are coming at us at any time. Our brain is always trying to pay attention. So imagine that sentry that is just kind of watching everything and scanning, and you're not even aware of it. Right now, you may have a fan in the background. You may have a pet at your feet. You may have...
My lips are so chapped. Man, where's my lip gloss stuff? Oh, wait. Am I thinking out loud? Because, Jen, I think what you were talking about was my brain was going through all that stuff. Even my lips are chapped right now.
Yeah.
Is that the reticular activating
system?
It's aware of all that?
All the things that are happening for you at the moment while your brain is trying to attend to something. So it's always paying attention. Exactly it. You might be thinking about those chapped lips. You might be thinking about how your glasses aren't straight on your nose. The lawnmower outside, the leaf blower.
Yeah. Could we do this? Could we take just like 30 seconds? I think we're good on time, and just dump it in the chat, everybody. What's your brain aware of right now? What are all of the things that your reticular activating system is aware of, and you give priority to some things and not to other things? Just curious. What's on your brain right now?
Besides us, I see that chapstick.
Yeah, I needed it too.
Now you're making me want it. So what kind of things are happening around you right now? Now you mean.
Oh, yeah.
The white noise of the air purifier. I admit I had to turn off the air conditioner so that it would not turn on and off because it was going to distract me.
Traffic, neck sore, itchy nose, am I thirsty? Oh, I love how people are talking about the real stuff. If you just wait for just a second and listen to your brain, it's all of that stuff that's happening. Oh, yeah? Mm-hmm. Susan wants to play with her children, want to listen and learn. Yep. Dog with a window. I need to move the sprinkler.
So imagine that you're in a staff meeting or in a district meeting. You're at some sort of leadership opportunity. What kind of things might be your brain might be paying attention to other than the meeting? I know we were talking about, should I talk, how we enter a room, but even in the meeting, you're thinking of all those things.
I wonder, Jen, if we put the phrase, I need to, because I'm seeing that a lot. I need to, the business to attend to. It's like, boy, that's on our brain. As you talk about doing meetings and you want to be productive with a crew, if I don't have space to even put that stuff aside or put it on my to-do list, my reticular activating system might just be overloaded with things. Mm-hmm. There's so much stuff that's on it.
But it hasn't. The reticular activating has an interesting piece to it. It's also your concierge. Have you ever noticed how people can say that they feel lucky, that things happen for them? It tends to bring you the things that you desire. So it tends to help your outlook. And so when we talk about grit and persistence and self-learning, all of that all those pieces, the energy flows where our attention goes. So when we create those affirmations, when we pause and visualize what it means for something to be successful, what does this look like when we're working on a project, when we're setting those goals, and what is visualizing what success might look like. I know before our session, I was getting in and going, okay, what is this going to look like? And in my mind, how is this going to flow? No pun on my last name, but and positive goal setting. So when you think about the goals that you want and those opportunities you're going to create, your reticular activating system can help fulfill that and can help bring those things to you and kind of almost act as a guide for that work.
Jen, I love that, because you're telling me that we have some choice in our brain, which is really cool. We can help determine where our attention goes, which takes a lot of practice. But if there's a lot of distractions and a lot of other things on there, it is difficult for us as human beings with it's just natural, the sounds, the smells, the feels. If it's overloaded in your brain, it's difficult to focus on something that you were supposed to focus on. So reminding us, no matter where we are in our circumstances, whether it's a staff meeting or working with a group of parents or whatever we're doing, a school board meeting, remember, keep those other distractions away, which, by the way, is all of your sensory stuff, whether the temperature is too far out of whack, or the smells, the aromas, the sounds, the visuals. The declutter and simplify is a good way to go. Remember, your brain has got all of this stuff on it. So sending out 3 emails right before your meeting and reminding people of all of the 10,000 things to do might be a little too much chaos for our brains. So be mindful of that. What's this next system? You said there are 3. The first you said was the RAS, Reticular Activating System, the concierge, and what was it? What was it? Concierge and something?
The Sentry.
Oh, Sentry, like protecting what's going to get focused on. Got it. And the welcoming in thoughts. Got it. Now there's a guard dog in our brain?
Now we have a guard dog.
Okay.
And the amygdala is that piece of our brain. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a reptilian brain, but it's that core, it's at the center. And it helps to deliver messages. It's what preserves us and keeps us safe. And so it's always searching for those emotional responses, whether it's fear. And you'll often hear fight, flight, but then there's also freeze and appease. Mm-hmm. And so it does those things where it is forcing us and giving us those opportunities to protect ourselves and to focus. But what happens when the amygdala engages, you often lose the ability to access that executive function that we were talking about earlier. And we're going to talk just a little bit more about, but you lose that ability to access those because your body and your mind goes right to, what do I need to do to survive? I'm feeling very nervous. I'm feeling very excited, or I'm feeling, I'm going to be walking into my classroom for the first time, or I'm new to the team, and how am I going to feel, and how's it going to, so you have all these extra feelings. Your amygdala is doing some of that communication for you. Interestingly though, smell will bypass everything else and goes to it. That's why when you smell fire, you immediately know to get out. It's an interesting thing. Everything else will kind of get processed just a tiny bit, but smell
Smell goes right in. So in that reticular activating system, if I see this right, all of the stuff coming through that brainstem and our eyeballs, our brain's trying to make sense of it, but the amygdala is there to watch and see, when do we need to fight or flee or freeze or appease. It's right in there. Smell, it goes straight into our brain. Like, we don't even have much of a chance in the amygdala. It doesn't get much in there, but our brain still makes sense of all of that. Amanda's got a great question in the chat. I think we'll come back to that one in a little bit, but let's think first a little bit about amygdala. And your amygdala is the guard dog, and we call it a hijack when the amygdala has a response and takes us away. So I'd like to come back to the 4 pictures we did in our Which One Doesn't Belong. And I'm curious, this picture of snakes, if I said this is our adventure tonight, and we were all going to go, or delivered to you a package where you could experience this, just on the 0 to 10, if you would, are you in? That's like a full 10, or are you like 0, no way? And I see a lot of zeros and no ways right now. And I'm guessing that these people, you are now having an amygdala response, but Jesse, I see, has a 6. You probably don't have an amygdala response the same way. Here's one, for example. I had a student, lovely student, calculus class. I had a snake at home that we bought as a family, and I thought it'd be cool to bring in, but I asked, and this one student said, no way. Please do not do that. I'm really afraid of them. I'm like, what do you mean really afraid? And he said, well, you know, my older brother used to lock me in a trunk and toss snakes in there with me and lock me in there as a kid. And I'm like, holy crap. Because of our experiences and where our brains are, I might have a different amygdala response than my student would, or that you. And I see that we have a few here. Remember, we're neurodiverse, so we react differently with different situations. How about this one? Scuba diving in the water with a bunch of fishies, maybe bigger or as big as you, or as at least big as your arm, or big enough that you could put your hand in, or they could put their mouth over your hand or other body parts. Are you in? 0 to 10. Oh, I see some 5s. 10. Eric's all in for that. Ireland, she's like, no thanks. Your amygdala, I see the amygdala responses. Jen's like, no way either. This is interesting. We're all different. So the way that your brain is helping to protect you and guard your human being, you as a self, those two little almond-sized shaped things in your brain there, they're helping you to determine whether you would go or not. How about the jumping off of a cliff? You're going to jump off some rocks into the water. Where are you on this one? Oh, that's interesting. Some people were saying 10s, and the ones are like flip-flopping. Is it the height? Our brains are weird. We have amygdala responses for these things. I love seeing everybody's differences. How about this one? We're going to do a green room, and we're going to shoot a video, and we're going to publish it, and everybody's going to get to see you and hear your voice on the record. And you're going to get to be in front of other people, and they'll get to watch the recording and see you. Oh, Jennifer Ireland's at a 10 on this one. This is a 10, 10, 10s, and some 3s and 0s. Wow, what might trigger an amygdala response for you might not trigger it in somebody else, because remember, we are diverse in our brains. This is awesome. I love seeing the variety on this, Jen. So here's a great example of how we have amygdala responses. And I will say this, whichever one was the most no way for you, and I don't know if that was the snakes or the underwater diving or the jumping off a cliff or the video production, whichever one is the most stressful for you, that makes you cringe or triggers you or whatever, that's your amygdala response you're feeling. That's that feeling that you get inside.
The great thing is you can continue to grow your brain and push through those if you wanted to. I have to say I'm not going to go in there. But at the green screen, I've gotten comfortable, a lot more comfortable being in front of groups than I used to be. But thinking about that amygdala hijack, that it's immediate. You immediately know you have that energy, you have that need to freeze or flee, and it's personal. You have a very strong reaction for yourself. And then like we saw in our chat, it is not the same reaction for everybody. It is very much a personal experience, and it's emotional. It is, you are connected to it emotionally, and it's overwhelming. It makes you feel that is the only way you can do it. So your body is taking that control. Thinking about it cuts off our higher order thinking skills. We started talking about that just a few minutes ago. But for the cortisol that floods your system because it goes right to your limbic system, it causes you to have that reaction. And it takes about 18 minutes for that to pass. So when you think about when you enter into a meeting or when you enter in a classroom and a student has that experience where their amygdala is feeling hijacked, if you're feeling questioned about an idea that you share and your amygdala goes into action, it can take you about 15, 18 minutes for that feeling and that cortisol to run through your system and to relax. So sometimes waiting to share more or waiting to circle back and come back and ask someone a question about it, or giving time for a student to think about that. Those are key things to keep in mind.
So we've got a question in the chat and on the screen. How have you experienced an amygdala hijack or seen it in others? That is, what triggers you? Maybe you have teenagers and they know your buttons. What triggers you? What gets your brain like all hijacked? Fight, flight, freeze, or appease? Give people a moment to think about that, and go ahead and put it in the chat when you're ready.
I've discovered one thing that triggers me, and it's a quiet chat.
Oh, it does.
Just wait a minute. So feel free. Please put them in there.
Jen, the word trigger is a word that I'm hearing a lot from people today when they're talking about things, and it really seems like an amygdala hijack. And I've seen it role playing in a language class. That would do it for me too. Yeah, triggering that. But I'm wondering about the word trigger. Like, it's such like one little thing, you push it or you pull the trigger, and then boom, the brain is like off doing its own thing. You can drop some words sometimes. And by the way, for play, maybe sometimes you might think how fun it is. Teenagers love doing it. They try to push that button, as what you might say, or do that to trigger on you. It's just the reality, and teenagers love to play with that too. Maybe some of us as adults still like doing that with each other. Eric's got one. Freezing on a cliff. Yeah, your amygdala just like takes over. Yeah.
I can relate to Eric. My very first teaching class we went camping. It was a summer Ed 101, and we went outside to go camping, and they took us and taught us how to tie a rock climbing knot, the figure 8. And within half an hour, we were supposed to be climbing the rock wall with the knot that we had just learned to tie. And that gave me amygdala hijack, because here I had to trust the knowledge that I had just gained and put myself at risk climbing a 100-foot wall. So I'm totally with Eric. I absolutely get that. It will give you cause for pause.
Kelly, I'm with you. There's sounds of voices for me, male and female, depending on how they come across, that just freezes my brain. And then I realize for me, I go into a lot of those behaviors that I learned as a kid to just freeze and appease. Those are the two that I learned. Just freeze and then appease, because I couldn't always flee the situation, and there was no fighting to win in my situations. But yeah, it's really interesting, those voices and those ways that we've experienced life and how they can create a trigger for us. Those amygdala hijacks. Really be mindful about amygdala hijacks, especially when it comes to kids. All right, next section of our brain, the three big ones. We had the, what was it? The RAS, the reticular activating system, that's kind of managing all the data that's coming in, telling our brains what to help focus on, and we can help control that. There's the amygdala hijack, the guard dog in there that could happen. And Jen, what's this third one?
This third one is the prefrontal cortex, and it's really our organizer and our executive. So it's going to orchestrate all the thoughts and thinking. We talk about executive functions. We talk about regulating self-regulation, all the different things. But it really is that front part of our brain, and it's the most recent addition to our brain as well. It's the most evolved part, but it's creating that orchestration for internal goals. And so it's comes with practice. It's those opportunities that we need to practice and to grow, and it develops over time. I think we mentioned earlier that this area doesn't really fully develop until about age 25. So when you think about students that we serve, particularly younger students, the scaffolds that we need, when we think about teenagers and those pre-adolescents, I'm sure many of us can think about all the times we did things where we shouldn't have, or we did them over and over again, and we didn't learn the first time, because our brain actually doesn't hold on to that, doesn't have it in that long-term memory, and it's not keeping it as well as it would have if we were older and had a fully developed system. And so it's kind of I like to think of it as a sticky note of sorts. It helps us hold, the working memory helps us hold that information, but then it doesn't really hold it all together all the time. And what you remember, what gets stored in your long-term memory from your sticky note from that piece can absolutely change. By the way, did you know that your working memory, if you were to imagine a cube that's about 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot, and that's the size of your working memory, the rest of your brain would be about the size of 15 galaxies.
So hold on, rewind that. You're saying the part that's my working memory, like in my prefrontal cortex, that's
the amount of your brain that can hold that. If we could expand that out and extend that image, that it would be about 1 foot by 1 foot. And then the rest of your brain, the information that it can store and can access, is about 15 galaxies.
15 galaxies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're telling me like the part like in the kitchen where I can do the work and get my food ready and stuff like that, space for things to put on the counter, that part of my brain is just really small. But the other stuff afterwards and before type of things, that's like galaxies worth of space.
Yes. Walking across the room and not remembering why you got up to go over there,
It's not me because we're just old.
It's a working memory.
It's a working memory. And like even with the question earlier about students or people who are on the spectrum a little bit, we do things differently, embracing neurodiversity. Some of us are amazing. Like Stephen Wiltshire, for example, he can fly in a helicopter over a city and see in his working memory, and he can put into his long-term memory these structures to understand and to see things. And it's a focus that's like amazing. We can train our brains, and some of us are just bent one way, or we see something when we're young and we get there. But all of us can exercise our prefrontal cortex to help with those their executive functions that we were talking about earlier, Jen. We're talking about fueling our brain growth. This is a part where we can train our thinking to start thinking critically about things, to think about things logically, to start thinking about things deeply. Like I see that Amanda made a comment about no matter where she's at, grocery store, school setting, but people talking poorly to a kid, it triggers her. And Eric, I'm with you too. It triggers me as well, because we've been training our brains to think critically about what's important, what's valuable, and what's good for other people. So even with the prefrontal cortex and exercising those executive functions, we can train systems in our brains, if you will, or representations to filter and understand all of that data, even though it's not in our working memory. It's in our system now. And so that just becomes a natural reaction, a way to process the data that we get.
And that's also your reticular activating system. Remember, we were talking about the sensory that's scanning and paying attention, what your brain pays attention to. We have that training, and we know how important that language is for kids. And so your brain, like we were talking about, the concierge, it's bringing it to you. You pick up on it, and you're hearing it more than other people do because you are aware of it. So I want to try something because I want to talk a little bit about the working memory. So I have a quick activity. If you have a pencil, scratch piece of paper, or a virtual sticky note, I'm gonna have Jeff put up a number. Oh,
Not gonna put it up yet. It was scrolling accidentally.
I'm going to have you put a number up, and you're going to share it for about 5 seconds. And then I'm going to ask people to write down that working number, that number that they see. Okay. So we're going to take about 5 seconds. You can put it in the chat if you want to, if that's your virtual sticky note.
But don't hit enter yet. Don't. Yeah.
Okay. Ready? I'm going to count to 5 on my fingers. And when I get to 5, then that way I don't count out loud. Okay. Ready? Okay. Go. Okay, go ahead and write that number down or put it into the chat. How many of you were able to remember 92170? Okay.
Is that like your zip code as a kid, Jen?
It is not my zip code. It sounds like a Washington zip code or a California zip code, doesn't it?
It kind of does.
So your brain actually starts can chunk things, and it's actually Miller's law. And Miller was a researcher in the 1950s who wrote quite a bit about this. And you may have heard about chunking, that you can remember 5 to 7 pieces of data. Well, they've continued to refine that research, and it turns out it's more like 2 to 4 in most cases. I'm going to have you do another number. You ready, Jeff?
I'm ready.
Okay. We're also going to have 5 seconds, and here it goes.
But Jen, I'm making sure this is trying to remember it.
Try to remember.
Then I can write it down, but not like just.
Don't start writing and transferring. Nope.
This is not a copying exercise. This is a can you remember it exercise.
Can you remember? So look at the number for 5 seconds.
All right.
We'll say go, and then you'll write it down. Ready? Oh. 1, 4. Okay. How much of that number are you able to remember and retain?
Oh, and if we talk a lot, they might forget, especially if I say other numbers too, like 8675309. Yeah.
All right. So 49150-82637. Wow, there are some really excellent memories in there. But it was probably a little bit more of a cognitive load for you to try and remember, to think about how many of you that remembered the number remembered them singly. Or how many of you started to pair them, 49, 15, 08, 26, 37? curious how they were paired. I'm seeing paired, Amanda and Dan. Stephanie did it in groups of 3. So this kind of goes back to the numbers that you were doing earlier, Jeff, with the shapes that you had, the circles. But how you cluster and how you do that, you're actually exercising that working memory. And we create clusters. When we do that, we can retain that. But when you think about when you propose an agenda for a meeting and you put 5 items on it, if they're unrelated, that'll be a lot of cognitive load for folks to continue to walk away with. Or if we're doing student lessons, thinking about what students will walk away with and what they will retain. But if we keep it very short or connected and they can cluster it and put those groups together, you actually build capacity in working memory. I've seen other examples of this for creating that, where you have like a short sentence that can be in English. My grandmother bought red apples. And then you can do a sentence that has just mixed up letters and then do another sentence. And so you can change how you showcase this. But this idea of creating those chunks, when you can make meaning from it, your brain can consolidate that into one chunk. And so that's really important as you're considering those staff meetings and agendas and things, of how much information you put in.
You're exactly right. It's those small chunks. I see trends like 3, 3, and 4. We can do in small chunks. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about in math land, why that works. But the reality is, the working memory, we need a few things to give us as the basis to come back to. Give me 3 main branches or thoughts, like that 5-paragraph paper that was super important in your high school English class or whatever. The intro, but then the 3 things, and then close it. Tell me what you're going to tell me the 3 things, and tell me what you told me. That's healthy and helpful for our brains. Too many things on it, I just can't put it all together at once. It's just too difficult to do. And then a bonus, I'll put his name in the chat box. Anders Ericsson, an amazing psychologist, just passed away last year, which is a bummer. But Anders Ericsson has done a ton of work, and some of his research was on how many digits can you remember? And the work around that, and then his study of experts was phenomenal. But if you're like, how many digits could I remember? Just look up Anders Ericsson and digit memory. It's really, really fascinating on how people can train their brains and to think about things into chunks or groups, and how we as individuals can put those into a mental representation, a story or whatever it is. And then that helps us to get things out of short-term memory or working memory into something that we can recall or use for later. It's pretty fascinating stuff. That's a bonus for today, Anders Ericsson. Okay, so we got our working memory. That's pretty amazing. What's this other end of this picture? Come on, Jen. How I feel like on a Monday sometimes.
I think this was me late at night, kind of going, I'm doing fine. But thinking about what it is that you are doing. How are you doing? What are some systems and tools that you use to help organize you or help organize others in your work? So thinking about when we're developing our planning, sequencing our strengths, how do we keep track of what we need to pay attention to? How do you prioritize? And I'm going to invite people to share in the chat some ways that you are keeping yourself organized.
So you're talking about prefrontal cortex, because there's all of this data that I'm trying to sort through, I'm trying to work through, and keeping it organized. And I would like to call out, Stephanie said number talks with Joe Bowler. You're right. That's a great way to exercise and to see those things and to use that working memory. Checklists and Post-its to help our brains. Google Calendar. Yes.
Listing and chunking, categorizing. I use color. Anyone else use color as a way to? Amanda uses every calendar possible.
She has a calendar for her calendars.
There you go. There's a website called Monday.com, which has the ability to create some lists, and you can check them off, and it actually will give you confetti. Talk about your dopamine rush. It gives you confetti when you complete your tasks.
This is wonderful to hear how we're so similar and different. It's kind of like embracing neurodiversity, and remember that the people you work with, they are different too. They need a system. And it's kind of that question that was asked for me a little bit ago, Jeff, what's your system that you're using to keep all of these ideas together? I'm like, oh yeah, I could really grow in that. And it's important for us to share these strategies with each other, but remembering that your system has got to work for you because it's your system. And because we're different, neurodiversity, embracing neurodiversity, we want to respect that and also encourage to sharing of things like that because it's going to help us to get stronger and clearer in our own. Yeah, for sure.
So I have one question for Eric. Is he writing on his hand with ink or with permanent marker? Looks like he's writing on his hand.
Ink. Got it. Wonderful. And Jen, I really appreciate you brought this slide in here because you're thinking about, again, the big three. We had the big three that are helping manage the data and the thinking and all that stuff in our brains, but we can help do some things to help bring on the happy. And why would we want to bring on the happy? I know it's happy is good, but I'm about learning. Come on, Jen. I'm about winning and learning. That's what I was supposed to do growing up. So why bring on the happy?
Well,
and how do we do it?
It goes back to that cognitive play that we've been talking about and the importance of play in our learning. We will get much more and get much further and be more efficient. Kind of like that what is the phrase? Go short to go long, or go slow to go far. That's what I'm trying to think of. But we will create that sense of community, create the strong relationships, and be able to engage in multiple tasks over time. And so using the neurotransmitters that are actually, they're free and in our brains. And so we create the environment that releases these, like norepinephrine, gives you anticipation, attention, and focus. Dopamine is one of my favorite. It's that success, that pleasure, satisfaction. As we were doing our hands and people were feeling successful, they were, feeling that sense of satisfaction, of completion. If you were like me and not successful, you might have felt a little frustration and feeling that need for mastery. Serotonin, when our brains release neurotransmitter serotonin, when we're part of the herd, when we work together collaboratively and collectively, when we create collective responsibility for our students or for initiatives that we're working on, that serotonin, that feeling of connectedness and engagement, and increases that engagement. Our oxytocin, the teamwork, bonding and trust and well-being, all of these things are what we want to engage and create in our brain because it invites that environment for that learning. We really want to inhibit the aggression and the competition, that cortisol release. We want to put that at rest and keep our guard dog and our sentry kind of down so that we're able to have these other opportunities. And so how do we bring in the happy? How can you create those moments of engagement for everyone? So how do you invite curiosity and positive transmitters? I see hugs.
Hugs for sure. Thanks, Amanda, for putting that in there. Yeah, and just in general, go ahead and put it in the chat. Any other ways that you know how to, and I like what you're calling it, Jen, bring on the happy. But it's like, how do we do that? Because it's important. If you're going to really foster brain growth, it's a lot like having a garden. If you go put gasoline and diesel on your tomato plants, they're not going to do well. You wanna help cultivate learning in the brain, and to do so, you need the right chemicals going on in the brain to make things go well. And all of these bring on the happy. It's not just the happiness of the smile, but it's a happy place for your brain to be able to grow. And without that, if you're hijacking with amygdala all the time and that cortisol is flooding your system, what you'll be ready for as a human being is to fight or flight. And your growing stuff isn't going to happen the same way. What you're going to grow is a better fighter and a better fleer, a better angst person, and we've seen that in the world and with people that we work with. And it's something that we can still grow out of, but it's really tough if we've been nurturing our brains in an aggressive and a competitive environment. Those are inhibitors when it really comes to good brain growth.
And you never know how small something that you do for someone, what the impact of that might be. I have a framed sticky note from a student that I've kept for probably almost 6 years now, where she snuck it on my desk and left it for me. But it's a sticky note that I framed. And so you never know how small the opportunity and how big the impact on someone's brain, because we are so neurodiverse. So taking those moments and those small moments to connect with each other and to share that can have a profound and lasting impact.
Wonderful. Loving on your pets, positive caring tone, positive uplifting music. This sounds a lot like, Jen, like that one thing with the ball bouncing that they were doing at the school. Or like, and reminding that sometimes even going out for a quick walk in nature or seeing things that are helping us to calm down will help our brains come back in a better balance where we're ready to learn and ready to grow instead of being so angst or on edge, triggered, if you would, instead of full of the cortisol and all of those aggression, survival stuff. We need to survive, and it's an okay thing to be surviving. But if you really want to nurture positive brain growth and you really want to see that happen, we want to get those promoting the collaboration, self-efficacy, teamwork, fun, directed play, all of those. Dun, dun, dun.
I'm looking at Stephanie. She and just a thumbs up was just impactful for her than someone coming by her room and giving her a thumbs up at the end of a day.
Something about those connections with people. It's amazing. It's serotonin, oxytocin. Jen, for time, it's 2:44. I would say that we should wait on this one. It'll be in the slide deck that we'll share out.
Absolutely.
And so for overcoming obstacles, remember we have our big 3 parts of our brain systems, that reticular activating system, which is what is it again, Jen? The sensory and the concierge. And in the amygdala, there's the guard dog. In the prefrontal cortex,
it's your organizer and your executive.
Got it. So let's go to the Padlet once more. What would be a way that you can see that we can overcome obstacles? Maybe a way that you're using your understanding of neuroscience, but how can we overcome obstacles? I'll give you a moment here to do some reflection on this part, and then we're going to close up our whole of our session. But this section, overcoming obstacles, how might we overcome obstacles? We invite you to take some time to think on your own and go ahead and put that on the Padlet if you would be so kind. So as we bring our time to a close today, I want to wrap up and remember that in all of these areas, these are 3 main areas that we can all continue to grow in. And we were thinking about the 3 areas for the neuroscience ABCs for supporting adult learners. So whatever your role is you're supporting adults, and we're all learners, and you're supporting other people, human beings trying to go. Remember, embrace neurodiversity. We're all uniquely different. We're similar, but we are very, very different. The culture that we bring, the wiring structures in our brains, how we see the world, how we express, how we want to engage, how we represent, we're all different. And then remember, fueling brain growth. It's a lot like a muscle. You got to give it its exercise that it needs and its rest as well for that brain to grow strongly. And then avoiding obstacles. Perhaps those 3 brain structures will help you remember that there is this sentry and concierge. So reminding ourselves about the data and the amount of stuff that we're putting in front of people's brains to think about. It's really tough sometimes to have too much on there. Remember, avoiding obstacles, that reticular activating system, the amygdala, like with the amygdala hijack, watch out for that, and invite you to keep growing on it. Like, how do you understand that, and how do you help people, and how do you avoid those amygdala hijacks? And then lastly, what was that part? The one is like right in the front, and it helps me think and organize all this stuff. It's like the prefrontal cortex.
That's the one
as well. So thank you so much for the time that we've had together today. And we would invite you to help your brains to consolidate. We're giving you the last 2 minutes here as we're finishing things up, just to think about what did you think beforehand? And Jen, what are the other questions we have here? You were on this one.
What did I think before? What was my initial thinking? How has my thinking changed from the time we've had together, from the resources that we shared? And then kind of an action question. What questions do I still have, or what am I still wondering? What do I want to know more about? Those are 3 great questions to kind of engage your prefrontal cortex, that deeper thinking and higher order thinking. I have loved, and I know this is a different session being in a chat, but I have loved seeing the chat and kind of almost feeling like we're all together in the same space.
They have been wonderful. Well, as we're closing our time together, Jen shared this quote from some other educators, and I really appreciate it. Jen, would you share the quote and then why this was important for you?
So this was a quote that I saw on some social media. If an educator can do advanced math, can speak a few languages, excel on an ed TPA, meet required standards, but can't recognize their autonomic nervous system states, their implicit biases, acknowledge their own stress, or see beneath the pain-based behaviors their students or themselves, then we've missed the mark in their pre-service preparation. This is on us. It's time for a change. And Neural Education is a group that I follow, and Paige Westcott is involved in that organization. But I think about how we can have all these external things, but if we don't recognize our own internal actions and our own diversity, our neurodiversity, our cultural diversity, all the ways that we're different and unique, and then all the value that brings to our teams, then we do kind of miss the mark. We do need to recognize and support that.
I'm with you. Our brains are important, and it's really important to know how we react because we all have them. But remember, we are neurodiverse, and we can do things to fuel our brain, and we can avoid some obstacles. We want to say thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to us. It's in the chat there, the slide deck, if you're interested in looking at the slide deck. And as our gift is we're closing our time, we wanted to make sure you have time to reflect. Maybe go outside and breathe fresh air for a moment, or at least go outside and see some greenery or something for a moment, and give yourself that brain space so your reticular activating system can focus on that data that's right now in your working memory, are things that we've been thinking about, or get a hug. Yeah, exactly. Give yourself a chance to help your brain grow. And remember, embrace neurodiversity, fuel brain growth, and avoid those obstacles. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate the time, and we appreciate all that you do.
Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, Jeff.